Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang namasami. Hello and welcome. I just chanted the homage to the Buddha in the Pali language we use in the southern schools of Buddhism, and it means homage to the noble one, the blessed one, the perfectly enlightened one. Buddha means awakened, and perfectly awakened or perfectly enlightened is used because the Buddha had no Buddhist teachings himself, no Dharma as such to follow, so was self-awakened, thus referred to as perfectly awakened. And that is followed by the short refrain reminding us, paying homage to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, otherwise referred to as the Triple Gem. These are reflections on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, that is, and the law of nature and everything, and the Sangha, those body of ordained representatives of those teachings and disciples of the foremost teacher, this perfectly enlightened Buddha, from 2567 or 8 years ago, depends who you ask. For those teachings to remain intact as they have for so long is indicative of the quality of their content, the unvarying nature of what is being observed and what is being taught as the unwavering truth, the Dharma. Of course, truth is just that. Once you see, hear, experience the truth, it cannot be unexperienced, and therefore is unequivocally just that, the truth. And really, in essence, this is the focus of Buddhism, the truth. Namely, the Four Noble Truths of suffering, the cause of suffering, the path leading, the end of suffering and the path leading to this end of suffering, Nirodha, a Pali word. And at the end of this talk, if I remember, and I usually don't, but most often you'll hear monks say this word, evam, which is another Pali word meaning something like, so it is. And if you are familiar with the Irish, Ireland is parts of Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, so the part of the UK, but is an island separate from England, Scotland and Wales, similar in size to here, Sri Lanka. Quite similar geographically in many respects, being an island off a mainland and having a relatively historically similar, somewhat sometimes difficult relationship, but to some extent a certain interdependence, as island nations do. If you're familiar with the Irish, they often say at the end of an expression, so it is, so it is, so it is. So they're like saying, Ewam, as a reaffirmation of what has been observed. So we say Ewam, so it is, as just reaffirming that that is the way we see it. It's just that. It's our experience. And if that is the truth, so unmasked, exposed, naked, then this is the experience we're looking for. Not some hidden, mystical, ethereal gem of knowledge that has to be believed in. Not some higher power that has to be prayed to or worshipped. But just an exposition, expose of what is the true nature of existence. That is the teachings of the Buddha. It's quite simple, isn't it? And I try to keep what I talk about also as simple, not only because I'm very simple in the way I live, but in the way I think. Having come from a busy and complicated previous life within this life of commerce and the Western world, a competitive environment, to this, a very secluded, in my case, solitary and simple existence in a forested area on the coast here in Sri Lanka, just looked after very basically my needs: food, shelter, clothing, medicine. Nothing complicated. In fact, my communication really doesn't go much further than this with yourselves via this forum, this format. And that I find useful, as I hope it is also useful to you. So what is? How do we develop? I often use this word practice. We often hear in Buddhist circles this word, practice. How is your practice? Even people ask me, how is your practice? I'm never sure quite, I smile, I'm never quite sure how to answer this. Because without getting deep into semantics and this debate over the use of particular words, but just to use the general understanding, the practice, simply as I usually sum up, is that of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, wisdom, or the development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. This is the wisdom we're referring to. Not so much the gaining of intellectual knowledge, the retention of facts. That is a good ability and a useful tool, especially for teaching and for getting to the bottom of the scriptures and understanding them and being able to relate them to others. But what the Buddha gave us and taught us was this simple Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path to practice, to do ourselves in order to become enlightened. Now that isn't a dirty word. Attaining to Nibbana isn't some thing that used to happen a long time ago in the time of the Buddha. And maybe in many, many generations to come, long into the future, possibly it could happen again. But now we just have to be good little Buddhists, doing this and doing that and keeping ourselves busy so as to keep our minds occupied from going astray into more unwholesome activities. No, the Buddha taught us to practice ourselves, do for ourselves what we can to become free from suffering within this lifetime, personally. Because what he taught is experiential, nothing to be believed. Even his words, he said, were not to be believed, but to be experienced for yourself. So really, it isn't practice. So when we say, go and practice, how is your practice? Ask yourself, what are you practicing? Practice is to do something repetitively in order to get it right, perfect it. You might practice to play the guitar or the piano, and it takes many, many hours, days, years, decades to get it right. And you continue practicing throughout your career of that activity. So in that sense, the Dharma that is taught is practiced. We are Buddhist practitioners. We may be monastic practitioners or lay practitioners. But when we say go and practice, or it's time for practice, or even the question, how is your practice? It's isolating what the Buddha taught. It's compartmentalizing it into some other area of our lives as something separate, on its own. A church somewhere, a temple somewhere, a mosque somewhere. But you don't see Christians or hear Christians or see Muslims or any of the Islamic faiths, Abrahamic faiths, generally asking each other, oh, how is your prayer today? How is your worship today? How is your religion today? They may ask, how are you? How is your family? And this, when we greet other monks coming to visit us, are the questions we would ask other monks. As a monk, I've had one visiting recently, my questions are, how are you? Meaning, how is his physical being and welfare after his travels? And are there any requisites, anything you need? That being either food or clothing, shelter or medicines that he may have run out along the way or be in need of. But I wouldn't ask him, how is his practice, as he perhaps oughtn't to ask me. Why? Because if we're not practicing, we shouldn't be doing it. All the Buddha taught us is to be incorporated within our activities. So I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about today, as usual. I just see what comes out. But I think I'll call this talk how to develop. And I'll ask you the question, how is your development? How are you developing? Not how is your practice, or how long are you practicing for, especially. Because you're always practicing, it goes without saying. So it is, ewam. This is why we have those affirmations of statement sometimes in localisms of accented languages, etc., where they'll say, so it is, after everything they say, because they're just affirming that that's the way it is. It's just that, or it's like this. So it is, ewam. It's not in terms of something to be debated. These talks are not ended in, well, there's food for thought, have a think about it. You'll get old, you'll get sick, you'll die. Now, you go away and think about that. Is it true? Is it not true? You don't need to. You know you'll get old, sick, and die. When? We don't know. How? We don't know. This too is as it is, just that. So there's a Pali word, bhavana, B-H-A with a line over the top, which means it's R, V-A-N-A, line over the top, R, bhavana, spelt bhavana, bhavana. Bhavana here in Sri Lanka refers to meditation, something they don't do much of, but actually translates more closely to development and is paired normally, coupled with another word. So you may have heard samatha vipassana or vipassana samatha. You've certainly heard these words separately. In the suttas, they come up just as vipassana samatha or samatha vipassana very infrequently, actually. Those two are not practices. Those two are just qualities. Those two as in those as well, not those two, because I'm going to mention a few others here. Vipassana means to see clearly. Samatha is peace and tranquility of mind. They're not practices, they're not things we do. They're qualities we are developing. So this is where it isn't debate on word use or the conventionality of language I'm discussing here. This is in everyone's mother tongue or the Pali language, the definition we take. Doing something is doing something. Developing something is developing it. That is making it slowly appear, like developing in the olden days a photograph. It's improving it. Usually you can develop unwholesome qualities as well as you can develop unwholesome qualities. But it's the emphasis on growth through nurture, through training, through practice. So we're always practicing to get it right, to perfect right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, using and with right effort to get right mindfulness and ultimately right samadhi, to experience jhanas, sensory seclusion from the 5 hindrances, obstacles, both in our meditation and during all of our daily activities. All of our actions of body, speech and mind are practices. Practices of speech, practices of thought, practices of action with our bodies. But also repeated to perfect. But in Buddhism, our goal is to become free from suffering in this lifetime. And for this, we're taught to develop. So we are developing our bodies and minds. Rupa, bodies, nama, minds. We're developing citta, that which knows. Outside of nama being more mind that is intellectually thinking brain, biological brain, computer, referred to as mind often, development, and our activities. So I say development of the body not to, yes, to keep ourselves fit, but in the way we behave, our behavioral actions. And in the development of right view, we come to understand that part of right view is, of course, all of our actions are the causes and conditions that have results now and into the future. But we have to concern ourselves with the present moment and our actions of body, speech and mind to determine the outcome of the next moment. And actions, the Pali word so often used and perhaps used in slightly the wrong context, is karma, of course. And this is part of right view. Knowing that our actions have causes and consequences. Our actions bear results or fruits. So we have bhavana samatha, the development of calm and tranquil, peaceful states of mind. Bhavana vipassana, the development of the quality of seeing clearly. It isn't a practice. Oh, I'm going on a vipassana course. Yes, they're called that because they're helping you develop that quality of seeing clearly. But it isn't what you're doing. What you're doing there is practicing mindfulness very intensively whilst sitting for a long time in order to observe the mind. This isn't even really developing jhanas or samadhi. We can develop mindfulness throughout all of our daily activities. And in the Satipatthana Sutta, we are taught by the Buddha the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And that is mindfulness of the body, kaya in the Pali. So we have kaya bhavana or bhavana kaya. I'm never sure which way these sentences work in the Pali language. There are many monks who can help you with that. Then we have the mindfulness of feelings, Vedana, and referred to as mind, but citta, mindfulness of the citta, bhavana, citta, developing the citta, and finally mindfulness of all of Dharma, sati, Dharma sati, so mindfulness of all phenomena. This last can be explained most easily in the sutta where the bark-clad ascetic demands ordination, and to cut a very long story short, before he gets run over by a cow, as I've told it before, the Buddha just says seeing is seeing, see seeing as just seeing, hearing as hearing, smelling as smelling, tasting as tasting, touching as touching. So taking these 5 rupa, bodily senses, and seeing them as just that is all we need to do. And he became enlightened and then run over by a cow. But at least he had time in that short space to be ordained, enlightened, and then attain to parinibbana. Citta bhavana, so sati, mindfulness of the citta, is developed with the practice holistically. So by practicing moral virtue, keeping the precepts, by regular practice of sitting, practicing formal meditation, developing single-pointed focus, awareness on a meditation object, is developing our concentration, developing samadhi, which will lead into jhanas, these very blissful, peaceful states, ultimately free from the hindrances and seclusion and a glimpse of Nibbana. And finally, the development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of wholesome mind states by practicing generosity, kindness, and living by way of and in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. Right speech, right actions, livelihood. This helps us paying close attention to what we're looking at, guarding our senses. Many of you are continually in front of some kind of screen or another these days, in front of you or in your hand, and being bombarded with all kinds of activities and information, sensory stimuli. And this is designed to attract your attention, get your interest, but it's commercially based. And we should be guarded about that. And by that guarding, that protecting, we are developing the more wholesome mind states, leading to samatha, peaceful and tranquil and calm minds. So when looking at the Satipatthana Sutta, these two are not practices, but qualities we develop. Those four foundations of mindfulness. This is all we need to do to become enlightened, is to have those four foundations of mindfulness. So mindfulness of the body, of our feelings, of the mind, and of all things, phenomena going on around us. So our physical body, what we're doing with it. The feelings, physically, but this also includes emotionally, what's coming up. Liking, not liking, neutral. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Just knowing those feelings. Mindfulness of that. It's not just physical feelings, not just mental feelings, it's all, it's both. Mindfulness, the development, bhavana kaya, development of mindfulness as well, in the body, is so useful because that is experiential here and now in the present moment. Whereas emotions are determined more often than not by that of memories of the past which have gone and should be just forgotten and left behind us, or imagination about the future. Our worries, our restlessness and our worries and concerns are formed with regret of our actions of the past. They cannot be undone, so forget about them now. And our uncertainty about the future. This is uncertainty. This is another aspect of right view. The three characteristics of existence, anicca, that everything, all conditioned things are impermanent, uncertain. And the other two, dukkha, unsatisfactory or suffering, and anatta, not self, out of our control. And this development, bhavana, kaya bhavana, development of the body, brings us into this present moment. And also helps us see clearly, bhavana vipassana, the impermanence of these feelings, whether they be physical or emotional. And that is, say, on these vipassana practicing courses, what they're doing, really observing that. So it's very useful, they're very good in that respect. But it's bhavana vipassana. what comes next is when you know, have seen the truth of impermanence. One minute you have toothache, a bit later you don't. Or one minute you're happy, the next minute you're sad. When you see this continual change in your body, you're seeing clearly the truth and can separate that knowing from that rather than attached to it. This is truly letting go. So whatever's happening around you, that which knows, the citta, is free from that suffering. Or unperturbed, unwavering, as the Dharma itself. And that's citta bhavana, development of the citta. When we have this knowledge base and this foundation of morality, then our minds will become able to settle calmly, experience tranquility and peace. And then we can develop samadhi, deep absorbed levels of concentration on a meditation object, and we can experience jhanas. And that is what we're here for. That is what we're doing. So, how are you developing? How do we measure this? We look at our defilements, the root causes of suffering. Remembering these Four Noble Truths, there's suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering. And we've just talked about the path leading to that end of suffering. We cannot just say, there's the cause, take it away. We have to treat the cause. So we have to understand, understand the cause. As the Buddha did, like a physician, a doctor, physician, treats illness. He recognizes from the symptoms the illness, and to treat it prescribes the medicine, as the Buddha does us. We see suffering, the cause of suffering has to be treated, and the cause of suffering is desire, but it's more easily explained when we understand the kilesas, and that is another Pali word, our defilements. Our natural inclinations, unwholesome qualities of greed, of hatred, and of delusion. Not ignorance in this case. Ignorance is a different word, not knowing something. So someone who's never heard of the Dharma is ignorant of the Dharma. But someone who's heard of the Dharma may still have delusion because they don't know how to apply it. They can see, or they've heard the truth, but they're not experiencing the truth. So mine's gone off the track a little bit there, but it'll come back. Maybe I'd got to the end of what I was going to say. We develop bhavana. Yes. We measure our progress of development, our bhavana, by how we are very gradually eroding greed, hatred and delusion. And this is that third part category of the Noble Eightfold Path. Wisdom, all contained in right view. By eradicating unwholesome mind states and increasing wholesome mind states, we slowly, through this practice of morality and meditation, we slowly erode, remove these defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. And in that process, what we know of the Dharma becomes clearer. We are more able to see it through our experience of it, and therefore remove that delusion. We see clearly that suffering doesn't go away. The world doesn't become peace and love through rose-tinted glasses after a light bulb flashes above our head, through burning some incense and lighting some candles and smelling pretty flowers. No. But our reactions to difficult situations, to pain, both physical and emotional, will gradually change with this practice. And that is what Buddhism is. It is bhavana. It is developing these qualities. Qualities of vipassana, qualities of samatha, the qualities of the Noble Eightfold Path, the qualities that are the four foundations of mindfulness, the 7 enlightenment factors being the ultimate qualities we wish to attain to. And there's a word for qualities, parami. There isn't a list of the 10 parami as we use in the southern schools of Buddhism, in the Pali Canon specifically, but these qualities of dana, that's generosity, satya, which is truthfulness, and so on, a lot of them similar to the Noble Eightfold Path. They come up throughout the suttas as qualities we are developing. So the key word here is bhavana. Not as it's understood here to mean just meditation, one part of the practice. It is the practice. So a more appropriate question is, how are you developing? How is your development? Or how is your bhavana? Because it should be assumed as Buddhists, you're always practicing, whatever you're doing, in all of your actions of body, speech and mind. A Christian is a Christian. They may be referred to as practicing Christians, but very rarely, only to differentiate the different intensities of prayer and worship. But a Christian is a Christian whether they pray and worship or not, if they relate to those teachings of their teacher, the Christ. As too, a Buddhist is a Buddhist, relating to the Buddha's teachings, whether they do what he taught or not. They're on that first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, in that they know he taught the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Whether they choose to develop upon that with bhavana of these different qualities is a matter of choice. But if we're not practicing, we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, that comes outside of a Buddhist's activities. And that, I can just simply say, if we're doing anything involving breaking the 5 precepts, it is not practice. If you're keeping the 5 precepts, everything you do is practice. Cleaning your teeth, going to the toilet, standing in the bus queue is practice. Because you're using the 4 foundations of mindfulness together. We cannot separate our actions of body. So we have kaya bhavana, development of our actions, wholesome actions, skillful actions, from our minds. In this case, citta bhavana, that which knows. But nama rupa is our thinking brain, its emotions. In the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the second, Vedana, feelings. Because citta has its own aspect for the third in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So not wanting to confuse it further, because I'm wanting to make it more clear, what we're doing here is we're developing. We're not practicing, but by developing, we're actually improving upon the skills we have. We can call it practice. I do all of the time. This is the practice. There's no problem with that word. But there isn't really a Pali word for practice. The Pali word for practice is karma, actions. So practice is just actions. So everything is practice. But it's used far too frequently to isolate what we're doing, those actions. Compartmentalize the Noble Eightfold Path, for instance, into an area of our lives separate from everything else that goes on. Like going to church on one day of the week and being good, and the rest of the week being bad. Into a physical building where you tell no lies and kill nothing. To leave that building to go and kill and lie. Well, the same could be said by, now I'm practicing. Today is a day of practice. No. Every day, every minute of your waking hour is practice. Because it's all karma. There's no Pali word, practice, in the Pali dictionary. There's synonyms. But the most useful word to equate to practice is karma. And we can generate karma that is good, bad, or neutral. And if it's within the Noble Eightfold Path and keeping precepts, it's good. Outside of that, it's bad, or possibly neutral. This is what we develop. And this is how we develop our minds and our bodies. So all of our actions of body, speech and mind are as a result of this development, this bhavana. To reduce, eliminate greed, lobha, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. to become free from the cause of suffering, and therefore free from suffering in this lifetime. Evam, or so it is. It's just that. So on that note, I hope there's something useful for you there. And please use it, share it, if you like it. If not, let it go. Do what you may, but please come back and listen again. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.